everyone, and welcome back to On That Note Podcast. I'm Brandon.
And I am Calvin. Welcome back to part 2 of episode 5 of the show.
Oh my gosh. Wow, which is really like, at this point, the 11th episode? Because the Waiting to Excel was 3. And if every episode is 2, so we're at 5, that'll be 10. But then that one extra one, so 11.
I like your math. So let's get into our noteworthy segment. So clues from last time.
I wrote them down.
Yes. Thank you so much.
So we said that this time we're going to be discussing 2 albums.
Yes.
Instead of 1.
Mm-hmm.
We also said that these albums are debut albums by now classic artists.
Yes.
So artists that have made a name for themselves. And then last but not least, that we'll be revisiting a previously used format.
Yes.
And that will be from season 1.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we could start with the last clue and say what the format that we're using is.
Yeah, sure. So the format that we're doing is our Hustle and Flows format. So we're doing another Hustle and Flow. So that means, from if y'all are season 1 listeners and we're around back then, we're going to be talking about some hip-hop artists, some rap artists, which is not typically, what we do all the time.
Not always our wheelhouse.
Yeah, but we have the range to do so.
We do. We do.
So we're going to be doing that, but do you want to share the artists and the projects?
I definitely will. So, as we've said before, a lot of great and classic and strong albums came out in 1994. And what you see, in addition to, we've had, a number of second albums.
Yeah.
The Aaliyah album, that was a debut album. So we see the debut, the advent of certain people that have gone on to become big. I'm stretching this out. But, these are 2 legends in hip-hop that both released their debut album within months of each other in April and September of 94. And that is none other than Nas with Illmatic.
Right. And
then the Notorious B.I.G. with Ready to Die.
Right.
So we're gonna discuss both albums, and really, I guess I'll clue the audience in on this too. This is a Hustle and Flows episode, but you will see us go in rounds akin to what we do with the Battle of the Bands. So it's kind of like a hybrid format, which you have the ability to do when you do your own show. So just to kind of briefly go over what each round is gonna look like. The first round is going to be us doing a setup of the artist and the album. So we're going to talk a little bit about who the artist is, kind of what went into making the album, giving some of that contextual information. Then we're going to move into round 2, which is where we're going to talk about some tracks that, tracks that I would say we both, appreciate from that album, from those respective albums, and then, but also thinking about tracks that really kind of can encompass the spirit of the album.
Right.
Too. So kind of if you're going to go listen to this project, these are the tracks I would recommend. And then last but not least, round 3 is going to be us talking about the legacy of the album and just kind of, some other little fun facts / closing tidbits.
Right.
So do you want to tell them which album each of us is doing?
Yeah. So what we decided to do, and it's the format. It's the format is like Battle of the Bands, and we're doing it in rounds. But I think we're just more so we each chose an artist to facilitate the conversation with. So I think that I'll start with mine, Brandon. You'll do yours, and kind of facilitate each round, but then kind of we'll both have some back and forth about the artist and how we feel.
For sure.
So I will be taking up Illmatic by Nas. And I think I have the chops to do so.
I think you do.
So we're gonna make it work, and then that means obviously you will be.
I'm holding it down.
Yeah.
Biggie. So just a note on that right quick, because I think it is funny that we had this conversation. So of course, whenever we do do an episode and we, you know, for each of our noteworthy segments, we listen to those projects in its entirety and, you know, look at other information, stuff like that. So research, it's a word.
To be prepared.
Okay. So in doing that, you know, we a lot of times will make a game day decision of, okay, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do that. So, but that means we both have to be prepared and listen to the project. So, I think it's interesting because, you know, both of us listened to both albums and then we got together and it's like, okay, so who's gonna do what? And I will say for both of us, we were just kind of like who we're representing in this conversation.
Yeah.
Was not exactly who probably people would have connected us with.
Right. And I think beyond that, something that we both said was like, in listening to the album, like listening to the album made us both switch who it was that we wanted to facilitate.
For sure.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can just kind of jump right on in it.
Round
if
one.
you want me to. Ding ding. So yeah, let's talk about Nas and kind of who he is and who he was leading up into Illmatic. So, as you said, this was a debut album for him, just like it was a debut album for Biggie. Nasir Jones is around 20, I want to say, at the time that this album comes out, which is crazy to think about. But so Nas is a kid from New York. You know, he lives in Queens though, and he's like living in the projects. I think it's like the Queensbridge project, I want to say, or something like that. But I think that's very reflective of what this debut album ends up being and what it ends up being about, right? So like, he gets signed, or he starts rapping, I guess, if you will, around like 91. And then releases this album in 94. So between that time, he's building up, you know, he's getting signed, and all that other stuff. He was signed to, let me see, who was he signed to when Illmatic came out? It was Columbia. Yeah, so signed to Columbia. And he drops this album, so I guess, I mean, I can just kind of talk thematically, if that's something that we're talking about. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just like, Illmatic is very much, I would say, in the way that my life was like a journal entry, I would say that this is very much like a reflective, contemplative journal entry for Nas, or a multitude of journal entries for Nas. It's very real in a way. And his talent is able to shine through, but I think what was most impressive to me was just the very grounded nature of it. You know, it just feels like he's just talking about what he's living day to day, which, you know, is not something that always happens now. But it's just so interesting because even throughout the album, right, some of the major things that he talks about is, well, he's talking about his community, so kind of like the drug epidemic. Mind you, this is like 94 is the 90s, but also after the 80s. So like,
yeah, these are kids of
right,
the 80s.
Exactly,
yeah.
Right. So like kids of the 80s. He was born in 79, so that means he literally grew up in that 73. I'm sorry. So that even more so, he was more aware and attuned to what was going on during the 80s because he was a little bit older than even I was giving him. And he was like in his, we'll say, adolescence maybe. He spent most of his teenage years in the 80s.
His formative years are in the 80s.
Exactly.
Right.
So that means that, you know, hard drugs we're talking about, you know, like people that he knows and knows well, dealing with drugs, dealing with gangs and gang violence, just dealing with all of these things that make it so that he comes from a place of just reflection of what he sees on a day-to-day. It's also interesting because a lot of what he talks about too is just like similar conversations that we have now about clout and about kind of like younger people coming up. And I mean, he wasn't that old at the time, but like talking about seeing teenagers come up in the drug game and even the rap game and like just kind of wanting to do it for clout or wanting to do it for fame and all this other stuff, which still is very much a thing today.
For sure it is.
But just lets you know what kind of artist he was. He was very much an artist that was real about his music, and was serious about, you know, what he was trying to do. So Illmatic drops, right? And it debuts at 12 on the US Billboard 200, which, you know, I think is a pretty, you know, respectable. Yeah,
I mean, for it to still be in the early, like, kind of days of hip hop,
right?
Releases
and a debut album,
yeah,
from someone that people might have heard of but hadn't heard before,
right?
You know, in terms of a studio album,
and then, I'm sorry, that too, in thinking about kind of where hip hop is at that moment too, right? Because you have the West that's making a lot of noise. You know, you had acts like NWA and The Chronic and you know, Doggy Style that have both been released by this point. So you know, it's like the West Coast hip hop is having a moment.
Yes.
So to see like a debut album, like you're saying, you know, it's
exactly.
You have expectations, but then you kind of have to temper those or think back to where the musical landscape was and just how much harder then it was to break a new artist than maybe it is even now sometimes.
Right, yeah. So something that I surprised that I enjoyed in researching this album was that one of the producers was Q-Tip. Like, I thought that was really cool. And there are a few other people, DJ Premier, Large Professor, Pete Rock, LES, Nas, but I just love Q-Tip, and I think that like he makes dope music. So it was nice to see that like they were working together that early on in Nas's career. So it debuts at number 12 out of 200 on the US Billboard 200. It sells 94,000 copies, which again respectable in the first week. And he has a few singles from the album too, a good amount, I would say. Isn't it like 5?
Yes.
Yeah.
5.
So he releases 5 singles, kind of over the course of '94, and one of the singles came out in '92, which means that, you know, he was kind of riding that single for a while before the album actually came out.
Like, you know how like a lot of times people will drop. Because when you have a new artist, too, you got to figure out what's going to work.
Right.
So, a lot of times, especially... Well, this happens even now, too. You'll see an artist that puts out, like, a lot of songs before we get the project.
Right, yeah.
Just trying to figure out what's the sound,
yeah, exactly.
what are people respond to.
Latching onto and all that stuff, too. But, yeah. So I guess that's all I'll say for now for the round 1, being that, you know... We've kind of gone through the album and how it did when it released. We'll kind of get into some of the singles and songs in round 2. But yeah, I mean, it's just, I think, so the reason why, you know, we were talking about kind of making this switch initially was I just didn't grow up listening to Nas. Like, he just wasn't somebody, and like at that 8 and 94, you know, I wasn't controlling the music that I was listening to.
No,
so it was just like, if I didn't have anybody in my life that was listening to it, I didn't listen to it. So yeah, Nas just wasn't somebody in my immediate nucleus or orbit. But you know, Biggie was somebody contrasting, sort of inescapable. Even before he released his debut album, which I think might be a good segue into.
I think it is.
Into you, so.
I think it is. So Christopher Wallace, aka the Notorious B.I.G, is, you know, a New York hip hop artist coming from Bed-Stuy. Yeah. Bed-Stuy. And that's Brooklyn.
That's Brooklyn.
Yeah. I knew that.
Look, New York is a big city, so I'm not gonna hold you to
it's
that.
like you're trying to keep all the neighborhoods, right? So Christopher Wallace, aka Notorious B.I.G, aka Biggie Smalls. comes on the scene in the early 90s. He's initially signed to Uptown.
Right.
That's
That's like Mary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, which is why, one of the first like kind of big popular songs that we knew Biggie to be on was the remix to Real Love.
Right. Yeah.
Because they were label mates.
Yeah.
And so, after recording, a number of songs under Uptown, and kind of getting this album, starting to get this debut album together, Puffy gets fired. Mm-hmm. And Puffy is the A&R person who brought Biggie to Uptown. So I didn't really read into like whatever deal Puff had to cut to let Andre Harrell to convince Andre Harrell to give him Biggie or what. But long story short, he ends up bringing Biggie over to Bad Boy, and I want to say Big is his first artist that he signs to Bad Boy.
I think so.
And kind of really, if you think about even the name of the label, you could honestly probably say to a degree, it's kind of built around Biggie in a sense. Like he's that flagship artist for Bad Boy. Like if you don't know anybody else that was signed to that record label, Notorious B.I.G.
Right.
And so, he picks back up with recording the album, and eventually it's released. And so, just to take a step back first, some of what I was reading just talked about how some of the like darker tracks on the album, which is interesting, right? Because the album's called Ready to Die.
Right.
So I can't imagine there are too many non-dark moments on the album. But some of those songs were recorded, like, those were some of the first ones he recorded. And so just to think about, and some of those songs will come up in the next round, but thinking about the level of hunger, the level of, to a degree, desperation. Because by this point, Biggie has engaged in drug dealing, been in jail, stuff like that. And so you really see like, okay, this is another opportunity to kind of like move away from doing what I had to do to survive to like, okay, like now let me really try to figure out a lane for myself and kind of where I want to go in the future.
Yeah.
So with Ready to Die, it is definitely autobiographical in nature. From the intro to the last track, which I can't wait to get into the next round and talk about like the songs. But from start to finish, it's someone telling their life.
Yeah.
And I think that what I can say even off the bat right now, and I'll delve into this a little more in a little bit, but I really grew in my appreciation for Biggie's artistry through listening to this album.
Okay.
There have been a number of musical debates I've been engaged in where it's like a one gotta go, and it's Biggie, Nas, Jay-Z, and Tupac.
Right.
And I would usually be like, oh, Biggie can go. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I always, like the singles and the songs that I heard on the radio. But I mean, I too was, not but so old in 94 to be listening to this whole project. But what I did downplay or underestimate about Biggie was his ability as a storyteller.
Okay.
He is a very, 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 very good storyteller to the point of listening to the album, and this is a concept we've talked about before, but songs that are movies.
Yeah.
Where you can like see, and because of how he spit, because of the even from the cadence to just lyrical content, I could really see what he was talking about. And I was just like, whoa, like, okay, Biggie really was nice. Like, I get why there are people who are staunch fans of Biggie Smalls.
Yeah. It's funny because I, again, felt the same way about Nas listening to this album. And I think storytelling it's interesting because it's like two different types of storytelling in a way. So like with Biggie, it's almost like you said, like a movie. Like you're put into a situation and you're like living it out. Whereas with Nas, he had this way of like it's almost like hearing a report of what happened. Like, as opposed to like actually being there in the moment, it's like hearing it secondhand, but it's still being just as effective.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, so to kind of round out this first portion, Ready to Die came out September 13th, 94. When it debuted, I'm trying to find where was the chart position. Because I was looking for that earlier, and I thought it might have been on this one source. Yeah. Okay, so I'm not saying the exact chart position, but it did ship 57,000 units in its first week. But this album kind of like, like certain albums hit and it's kind of like slow, or like some albums will hit and it's immediately successful, and then there's some albums that kind of live in the between space where like it hits, it might not be like a whole bunch of fanfare, but then it kind of like, when it gets going, and that happens fast. And so I think that's probably how you could describe Biggie's album, because within 2 months, it sold 10 times of what it, had sold in its first week. It went gold. And then, within a year, it went double platinum. And then, of course, in the time since, it's gone like at least 6 times platinum.
Right, yeah.
So, and I mean, that could be attributed to not only just the music, but then, we also tend to appreciate people a lot more when they're no longer with us, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But, definitely many accolades, and that's something we'll talk about later on. But, commercially successful, critically successful. And even the album cover has been heralded as one of the best album covers of all time. And I'm pretty sure is that his daughter? For some reason, I thought that was his daughter on the cover. Maybe I'm wrong. I will fact check that.
Yeah.
And I will get back to you all by that by the end of it. But in terms of like producers on this project, you really see this being like the beginning of like that bad boy cadre of producers that pretty much did like everybody's projects from the first couple of Bad Boy releases. But of course you got Puffy, and I think Puffy, you really hear his influence particularly on like those singles.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
With that gloss and that more Biggie's still rapping hard, but it's not as gritty as some of the other tracks on the album.
Right.
DJ Premier, Chucky Thompson, Lord Finesse, Easy Mo B, a lot of people that definitely have gone on to really like, people can look back and be like, yo, like he has some heavy hitters on a debut album.
Right.
And to your point about Nas, starting to rap around, I think you said 91 or something like that. He was around 18, and on the intro, I want to say this is the intro. Biggie says that like he's been rapping since he was like 18 or something like that. That's when he like really started to realize he had the ability, and then a couple of years later, puts out what would come to be known as a classic.
Yeah.
So, all right, so that's gonna wrap me up with part 1.
Okay.
And now we're gonna delve a little bit more into some actually tracks off the album.
Yeah. So in round 2, ding ding, we're gonna talk about just kind of songs that captured the spirit of the album. Like just what, if you were to describe the album in a few songs, or if you were to tell someone like, this is the album, like listen to Illmatic, and if you really want to get a taste for what Illmatic was all about, listen to this, this, and this.
Right.
So I can start with mine if you want.
Yes.
So Nas has an intro on his album, just to put that out there, because we were talking about intros, I think, in part 1 of this episode. And so it sets the stage, I think, in a lot of ways. It's called the Genesis. It really sets the stage for like what life was like in New York, more specifically in Queens, more specifically for Nas.
Mm-hmm.
So the next song that I think captures it more is New York State of Mind, which immediately follows the intro and is essentially the song to go with the kind of more introductory, the Genesis, right? So New York State of Mind, when you think about that, you know, or depending on what your frame of reference is, there's a classic song called New York State of Mind, you know, that Nas is obviously referencing, but it's just very much turning that on its head. And so New York State of Mind is talking about the New York that Nas experiences, which is a New York that is riddled with drugs and gangs and violence. And it's just so funny because the way that Nas talks about it is, it's very much like he was a part of that.
Yeah.
But even in the album, and maybe that's because he's been doing music for a while at that point, but there's like this feeling of removal, like more so, like I said, giving a report on what has happened as opposed to like, this is what's happening right now.
Right.
Which for me was a little bit easier to digest,
Yeah.
to be completely honest. But it's just so fun because again, like, he talks about this like real rap versus fake rap, which is like kind of surreal to go back and listen to, given like what we talk about right now. It's just so interesting to have these, to realize that these conversations have been going on really since the inception of hip hop, of just like what makes it real, what makes it not. And he talks a lot about like kind of the young boys that he sees in his neighborhood kind of succumbing to a lot of, whether it's the drug dealing or the gang violence or anything like that, that really that I think he might be on the other side of and realizes might not be like the best path, but it's just kind of talking about what's going on with him. And it's just, Nas is incredibly talented and with his flow, and with the way that he raps, but it's subtle, and I have some thoughts about that when that might be a round 3 thing.
Okay.
Just some thoughts in comparing Biggie and Nas.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, definitely New York State of Mind is one that I think really encapsulates what the message of Illmatic is, which is essentially just like, this is me, this is my life, this is what it looks like. The next one, Life's a Bitch, you know? Like, I think that, I mean, just that title, right?
Yeah.
Like, but it's just, it would be very difficult for me, I think, or really anyone, to have the type of life that Nas lived up until this point, and then have the wherewithal to like tell the story about it in a way that's creative and shows artistry. So Life's a Bitch, if you can't tell from the title, is absolutely one of those darker tracks that just speaks more so to Nas realizing that in his community and like in the space that he's in, you're either going to like be a drug dealer, you know, or you're gonna, you know, go to jail, or you're gonna be in a gang, or some combination of the 3.
Right.
And you're gonna do that until you die. Like, and that's it's dark, you know, and it's morbid, but it's very much his experience. Like, to not know a life beyond that, is something that, like, I was gonna say a few, but maybe too many people are able to identify with, especially in this country. But then beyond that, just like, it's very, very hard to get out of. You know? Like, I think Life's a Bitch, the reason why it really encapsulates Illmatic is because it's like, when you think about, because now, like, looking back, this is something that is so important, like, for lots of different people, black folks, white folks, whatever, you know? But it's like the way that white people, in a lot of ways, digest hip hop, it's like, it's the way that white women watch Lifetime movies.
Oh, cool.
You know, it's like, and it's the thrill, it's like you absolutely don't live this life. This is absolutely not something that you, like, have experienced. But being able to watch it in a movie, being able to listen to it in an album, like, gives you this little thrill, right? It's just like, ooh, this is dangerous.
Okay.
You know, like,
get
oh
away
my God,
from me.
like,
Yeah.
oh my God, someone's getting shot. Oh my God. So I think that Life's a Bitch is that. Like, it is very much like, I could see, you know, the yuppie white folks that hang around Union Market with all the tattoos, you know, being like, oh my God, that song on Illmatic, Life's a Bitch, like, that just changed my life. Like,
go away from
so
me. I mean, I will say that is probably one of my favorite songs on that album, but also because of, like, the sample.
Oh yeah.
You
yeah.
know what
I mean, and I mean, we can talk about that now too, because of course, for me personally, you know, and I think that is a favorite song for the both of us. Mm-hmm. So the song samples Yearning for Your Love by the Gap Band. And just, you know, I will never get enough of
Gap
yeah,
song.
Right. I think it might be mine too, and like it's done well. We talked about before when I think one time either while you were sleeping or when that back was Yearning by 7th Streeter.
Yes.
And
somebody else I could have said I wanted to bring up.
It's okay.
Call back to the first
one. But in my notes, like, I wrote this, like, my God. Like, I wrote that because of the sample. Because, like, I don't know, I love that song, and it was done really well. The other song is also a sampled song. It's toward the end of the album. It might actually be it's the last track.
It is.
It Ain't Hard to Tell. So I think that this is where Nas shows up in the most significant way. Yeah. Like, as far as his rapping ability, as far as his flow, him being able to ride the beat, like, he does it really well, like you were talking about, like the way you start and end the album, like he closed this album out.
Yeah, he did.
And so it's another sample. It samples Human Nature by Michael Jackson. He's doing a lot of like shit talking, which like he wasn't doing through most of the album. Yeah. So it's very much, I don't know, it's just very hip hop, I think. And again, just kind of encapsulates like a lot of what Illmatic is all about. So yeah, I mean, I guess those three are the three that I would point to and be like, oh yeah, Illmatic, these three songs come to mind.
Okay. So I think that, so what I was looking at and thinking about as you're talking about those songs and then thinking about Ready to Die was just looking at the track listing, and for these to be like, to look at these albums or their track listings like book chapters in the autobiography instead of like tracks on an album. Yeah. And I think that is very interesting because they both, you know, read like that. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, ooh, like in a chapter in an autobiography called Life's a Bitch, I want to read that. Yeah, right. Yeah. And, you know what I'm saying? Just like, oh, I see a chapter in a biography called Ready to Die. I want to read the chapter that says, you know what I'm saying, things have changed or everyday struggle. Right. But so for all that, to get into some actual songs. So with Ready to Die having such notable and known singles, you know, you think about Juicy was the first single released on the album, you know, then you go into Big Papa, and then, you know, eventually you get to One More Chance, which is not the version that's on the album, right? There was a lot of that back in the day. Right. I mean, and sometimes, too, you think about, like, sample clearance and when something might clear. Exactly. Stuff like that. Like, so that, I will just say that I prefer the the video version,
right?
the
Yeah,
non-album version of One More Chance,
yeah.
so much.
I was hoping you had the answer to that question because I listened to it and I was like, am I crazy? Like this is not.
Yeah, no.
This ain't it.
Right. It's not my favorite version.
Yeah.
And One More Chance is one of my favorite Biggie songs.
Mm-hmm.
But so in setting all of that up, I am not going to talk about any of the known, like the bigger known singles.
Yeah.
Like I don't have Juicy or One More Chance or Big Papa.
Mm-hmm.
And my listen, not to say that those songs aren't characteristic of the album, but I think that and thinking about this project and listening to it and then having the benefit of being able to look back on a project, on like an artist, things like that, I think that there are other songs, and a lot of them are well known because that's the thing about one album that's 25 years old. You've had enough time for even the songs that were album cuts to become popular.
Right.
And then, as we know too, with a lot of hip hop albums, you don't usually have a lot of like radio singles, things like that. It's like, you have the songs that are put out there, but then a lot of songs are from just fans and who likes what.
Right.
And so the 3 songs that I chose are definitely fan favorites and very much so known still,
Right.
but they weren't singles per se.
Okay.
So the first one is Give Me the Loot.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you were wondering why that phrase sounds familiar, you most recently heard it sampled in Sicko Mode.
Yeah.
But this is definitely like a very popular song by Biggie, and one that I'd say connects back to the spirit of the album, because Ready to Die, from the beginning, so talking about intros, the intro on this album pretty much is bringing you through from the time Biggie is born as a young boy to being incarcerated to now rapping. Like, you pretty much go through all those stages in that intro. And so it makes you ready for when you get, the first track. And then I want to say Give Me the Loot is Give Me the Loot is the second song that you hear on the album. And in the song, you have Biggie, and this is a song that I was listening to when I was just like, oh shit, no, I really slept on Biggie. Because, one, his ability to embody characters in songs was it was actually pretty amazing. Because in the song, he's talking to his younger self about scheming, robbing, getting to the money, you know what I'm saying, and talking about how he's doing it now, and they're going back and forth. But it sounds almost like 2 different people, too. So you hear the skitterish, like the, rap, and by the time you get to the end of the song, it's not just give me the loot, give me the loot, it's give me the loot, give me the loot. Like, it's like, okay, shit, like this has escalated.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so I really think that for me was just like, oh shit. Mm-hmm. Like, at one point he talks about like even robbing like a mother, like a pregnant lady, saying like, I'll give me the baby rings and the number 1 mom pendant. And it's like, shit, like if you couldn't already conjure up an image of him robbing a pregnant woman, you got it by the time he finishes that. And so it's just interesting, like, for me it was interesting hearing how he's able to really put you in that moment.
Yeah.
So you look like you had something to say.
And listening to this album, I had to really remove myself emotion. Like, this shit was low-key triggering, but then also just like,
oh yeah,
whoa, and so I said maybe the first part of this was like, I didn't listen to a lot of Nas, but really the only Biggie songs that I really listened to were the singles, right? And some of them were like more graphic than others, I guess, but a lot of that was more sexual because that was what sold,
Yeah, I mean, because even in Juicy, like he's not talking about what he did in the same ways he is in some of these other songs.
I got to Give Me the Loot, and I was just like, I don't really like this. Like, yeah, of course, like he was like the artistry is there, you know, and Biggie is rapping and stuff, but I was just like, yikes,
Yeah,
like,
right.
seriously.
No, I can
But you're right.
imagine.
I mean, but this album, by and large, evokes that emotion.
Yeah,
so I can
like-
see why
like
it's
you
one
see
of
it,
yeah.
you know
I
what
can
I'm
see
saying?
why it's one of your three.
So that was the first one.
Yeah.
Then my second track, actually, I'm trying to make sure that I want to save that one for last. So next we're gonna go to Warning.
Okay.
Which is interesting because this track has been done by a number of people. Like Nicki Minaj has a version that was on one of her mixtapes or something.
YG has something similar on his first
Yeah.
album, or I think it's his first album on, what is it called? My Crazy Life.
I was about to say,
Yeah, it's called My Crazy Life.
Yes.
He has a track that's similar.
And a lot of people have, done, like, even Kim has had, songs like, if you kind of think about An Aunt Died, that's kind of like in a similar vein to A Warning, where, the whole premise is somebody is plotting on you, like how you gonna act?
Right. Yeah.
And so, essentially
God.
with this song, it's interesting because it's like, okay, and Give Me the Loot, you're the one that's perpetrating like the violence on someone else. That in this song, you're pretty much going through, like, you're learning about this plot on your life, and then you also have to figure out how to not become the mark. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so I chose this song because, again, the storytelling and the vivid imagery that's on display is, you know what I'm saying, just, I can't even, it is really amazing. And the line that I heard that really kind of like drew me in was when he says, got the Rottweilers by the door and I feed them gunpowder so they can devour the criminals that like want to stop my door, stop my flow or something like that. But I was just like, wow, like, you have Rottweilers by the door that you're feeding gunpowder so they can like sniff out if somebody is trying to like come at you like with guns. Like, I don't, it's just, I like, it was just
what
like
a life to live.
Yeah, like, it's like that, but it's like, damn, too, like, that's a hell of a thought. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna feed these dogs gunpowder so, like, they train to go, essentially. They know what time it is.
My God.
So, yeah, and it's also, like, another instance in where he's, like, going back and forth, like, with a conversation. Not, well, with someone else, but, like, essentially with himself, too.
Yeah.
So speaking of conversations with himself, definitely my last track is a good display of that. And that is the last song on the album.
Yeah.
If you're not listening to like the deluxe album, or like I think Who Shot You or something is at the end.
I think so.
On there. But on the last track of Ready to Die is called Suicidal Thoughts.
Yeah.
And so, before I get fully into the song, just thinking about an album called Ready to Die. Right? Which most people would kind of be like, oh no, that tracks. Like, that makes sense. That he would end the album with a song called Suicidal Thoughts because he titled it Ready to Die. So if I'm ready to die, that's either I'm ready to die in the sense that I know I'm involved in a lot of shit that could take me out, so I'm just ready, I'm prepared, or I'm ready to make this decision myself, which is all heavy.
Yes.
None of this is light reading.
No.
None of this is,
No.
it's for rated E for everyone. None of it. But so that really just like spoke a lot to me. And with this song, and I'm actually like ashamed to say I had not listened to this song before now, But now that I have it, also, I would never go so hard for Biggie to go and the one gotta go again, because what you have in this song is the ability to really go deep. Like, there's like not a corner of his life that he leaves unturned, as he's talking about all the reasons why he's ready to make this decision. And the fact that like it's so real, because everything from Puffy, like, you know, hearing his voice and be like, yo, like, what's going on? But you hearing Biggie like rap over him, like tuning that out. And it's just like, whoa, like this is very, like, I see it. I see it. I mean, so this song for me, the vivid lyricism, I thought the part where he talks about his mom and how she probably wished she had gotten an abortion. Like, it was just like, shit. Like, it really, it's a heavy track. And it's definitely songs like Suicidal Thoughts, much in the same way as, even though I've never cared for Eminem personally as a rapper, Stan for him is like, I can never deny his ability. If I reduce it down to one song, based on that song, I'll never deny his like lyrical ability.
I'll give you a better one, or perhaps one that's more palatable for the both of us. But "You" by Kendrick Lamar on what is that, To Pimp a Butterfly? Oh my God, yes. Ooh, yes. That's real deep too. But
yeah, this song I think is in that way, and definitely closing out the whole piece of songs that like capture the spirit of the album. Again, if you look at the relation to the title of the album, but then you just also think about at the end of telling your story, what are you as an individual left with? All of the memories that you've had to conjure back up, all of the, you know, and that's the good as well as the bad, the parts that you're innocent as well as the parts that you're guilty. And so
where does that leave you? Because you could, like, on an album like Ready to Die, it could very much end on a point of like, you know what? Never mind. I'm good. Everything worked out. You know, like all that other stuff. Like, that could have been the story. But it's not.
Or it could have been that whole, like, that braggadocious, I'm ready to die, so what y'all niggas got. You know what I'm saying? But I think that this song was more revealing about who Biggie was as maybe a person and an artist than I think a lot of the songs that, you know what I'm saying, we've come to know him by.
That's still part 3, but you're making very good points that we're definitely going to talk about. There is a line in one of the songs from Biggie's album that I just wanted to point out, because that was the only lyric that like I actually wrote down. So it was from Everyday Struggle, which I get it now, but so
like
Biggie,
like LaFace. Sorry.
So cute. So Biggie says in Everyday Struggle, he says, I'm seeing body after body, and I'm Mayor Giuliani, ain't trying to see nobody be the Black John Gotti. And like that to me, well, one, it is a very like prevalent callback given the fact that Giuliani is still out here like being a piece of shit. But it's like, it's also so very real. Like it speaks to, I think, the societal, cultural impact of the world that we're talking about. Like it's a woke, if you want to call it that, if you want to use that word, statement to make, because it's essentially like, I understand the duality of the fact that there is very much crime in this city, in my environment, that's for all intents and purposes legalized, you know, or at least not policed as heavily. So it's just like, there's like, I realize I'm doing what I'm doing, but at the same time, like, if I was white, nobody will be looking at this as heavily because there's other people, you know, like bosses, families, you know, like who are able to make so much in this city off of the same game, you know, because they're protected. So
that's facts.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything has another side to it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, with that, we can move into round 3. Yes. I guess. So, I think I want to do it now while it's fresh on my mind. Just kind of, because I had a thought while I was listening to these two. And I think it came up in both of our round 2s. Just about the difference, perhaps, in the albums.
Oh, yes. I have a thought.
Yeah. So, what you just said was, you know, in the song Suicidal Thoughts, we see a side of Biggie that perhaps isn't there prevalently all the way through. I think that in Illmatic, Nas is giving you that reflective kind of thought process throughout. And then for Biggie, you really only get to see that in a few select tracks. And a lot of them are the ones that you selected. But Biggie has he has a different approach, which presents this, like, bravado and, like, this. Because, like, Illmatic also is not, like, super sexual in the way that Biggie has absolutely no problem just, like, dogging out women. And just, like, Biggie, like... The reason why I made the switch to Nas from Biggie was, like, listening through this album, I was just like, oh, Biggie, like...
Biggie was wild.
Yes, in a lot of different ways. Like, the song Bleep Me, the interlude or whatever, like, listening to that was just like, whoa, like, wow. You're just putting it all out there, you know? Right. But it's, again, personally... For me,
ain't that the one where the girls like say you?
Yeah, you KFC eating Jenny Craig diet. Oh, I was just like, first of all,
God
why?
I love Lil Kim.
Like, who wants to hear that? Or that, like, is that doing it for you? Like, but it's so like it was hilarious to me listening to that track.
It was, but because, even they start laughing.
Right? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. So but like,
I have another thought. But
right. Ahead. But like, essentially to get him to where she was trying to get him, like she was like, journey. How, not the point, but so. I'll let you say what you have to say too, because I also I have a comparison, I think, to something that we've mentioned before in a past Hustle and Flows that I think tracks with these two. That works really well, but go ahead.
Perfect. So I was going to say too, I think that what you see between birds, what I see between Illmatic and Ready to Die, because Nas and Biggie are very different personas. Yes. Like they have very different. They both could be in the same room, and the energy and the presence is gonna be one side. Like if you're in the circle talking to Nas, it's gonna be completely different.
Right. Yes.
If you're over in the circle talking to Biggie, and I think that what you see, or what I got from both of the albums, is they're both documenting like real life, real shit. Stuff like that. There's at times an ability to be a little bit lighthearted with Biggie,
right? That
I don't think you necessarily see with Nas. Yeah. And just thinking about how did that translate into the music? How did that translate into like the type of artists that they were known to be? Because to your point, you know what I'm saying, you do have a lot of those songs from Biggie's album that became like really like, you know, club or like radio, and you know, people still bump them when they trying to have a good time. Whereas like if I'm really trying to like be on some let me get into this hip hop shit, I'm gonna put on Illmatic.
Right.
And I think a part of that too comes from just the overwhelming musical influence that you can hear throughout the projects.
Yeah.
Like both of them are New York hip hop albums, East Coast hip hop albums. I'm gonna say New York specifically though, because there's just a certain sound that you were gonna always get at that point in time. It was gonna either be like the real jazzy with the horns.
Yes.
And the,
oh my God, that was the point that I was gonna make. Yeah.
Like you're gonna either get that, or you're gonna get like that soul sample, that R&B sample. And like that's what you see with like Illmatic does have like some R&B samples and stuff on it. Don't get me wrong, but I kept on thinking like, oh, this is like a jazzy sort of, and that might be because of I think like what Pete Rock worked on it, or I know DJ Premier usually does a lot of that too. But with Biggie and the influence of Puffy, you see a lot of that like. We're gonna use this R&B, we're gonna use this soul, and like thinking about how that kind of works into the music.
All kind of, of course, all tracks with black music, but then specifically for New York, if you think about the Harlem Renaissance, if you think about all of the soul artists that have come out of New York and all that other stuff, like there's something about that New York sound that retains that. But it's so interesting because it's like, if like My Life by Mary J was like ripped into two different parts, I think that you would get Illmatic and you would get Ready to Die. Like
no, that's
like
shit.
It's like Ready to Die is like Illmatic's Tether. Like
and if you want to think about it linearly too, because Biggie was on Mary's first album. Then you have My Life. Nas was on Share My World. You know what I'm saying? So in a sense,
it's like if you had like, I'm thinking about like old Smallville episodes that I used to watch, but just like if you could split somebody into an entity into two different things and like the qualities that you would get in either, I think that's very true. Also, another point that I was gonna say is, so I think about the way that we talked about the Migos, more specifically, the way we talked about Quavo and the way we talked about Takeoff. There are lots of ways in which I think Ready to Die and Biggie's presence and persona there are very much Quavo-esque or vice versa, since Biggie came first.
Thank you.
And then, Takeoff would take more so of the Nas approach, because first of all, if you just look at track listing, we're talking about 19 tracks as opposed to 10 tracks. So, tracks. And just like there was an ease with Nas, and just kind of this like the same way that we would talk about Takeoff and how he was just kind of non-assuming, and just kind of did what he needed to do. I think that's very much what Illmatic does. But Biggie is constantly, figuratively and literally throwing his dick on the table, which is very much what I said, Quavo did with his album. So it was just interesting because I thought back to that and I thought back to that conversation. And it's just like, again, like you said, like if you think about, because it's like you have lots of different friends in your life that give you different things. But I can picture, especially during this time, right? Like being in a room, being at, whatever, the Source Awards or whatever. And it's like the people that are over there and they want to talk to Nas and the people that want to talk to Biggie and the type of conversations that they're having. And just what they choose to talk about. And then I guess I think... Because, Nas, I think, is just a conscious rapper, and that's maybe where the difference is, where if Biggie was, I'd never call him Notorious B.I.G. Like, it's just too much to say, maybe. But, like, if Biggie, if hip-hop was more prevalent in pop then, he was very much more so a pop hip-hop artist
for sure.
than Nas was, which was why I probably heard more of him and was exposed to him more because, like as far as conscious rap at the age of whatever age I was, when Illmatic came out, like why, like, I wouldn't have the, exactly. But yeah, that was just interesting and a thought that I had in kind of like comparing the two.
I mean, I definitely agree in a lot of ways. I will say though that unlike Quavo, Ready to Die doesn't lose focus. Like it's
That's
there,
true.
it's
That's
here
true.
to
Yeah,
do
yeah,
a job,
yeah. Right.
and it's
It
gonna do
does.
that job.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
And
Right.
I think that you know what I'm saying, even in listening, thank you because I picked up that mug a second ago and I ain't see nothing in it. But so in thinking about then how that functions with an album of this length, you do almost have to take it in. You can consume the project all at once, or you could consume it in smaller, more digestible bites.
Right.
Because the album is doing a lot,
Yes.
but it's all taking you into a similar territory.
That's true.
But I do think that with this being Bad Boy's first release, this is the first album ever that's coming out under the Bad Boy name.
That's true.
In a lot of ways, in as much as we see it as Biggie throwing his dick on the table, it's Sean Puffy Combs throwing his dick on the table. Like,
right.
oh, this is what I'm capable of.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I think that with Puffy, and by this time he's crafted these monster hits for Mary J. Blige and for Jodeci, and you know what I'm saying, all these other artists that want Uptown, like the stakes are gonna be even higher for him with his own artists on his own label.
Yeah.
And I think that that's, you know, you definitely, this is Biggie's debut album, but it's in a lot of ways Puffy's debut album as well. And one of the things that I didn't realize, probably due to my age at the time, was this was the only album that was released while Biggie was alive. I didn't realize that Life After Death it was released like 2 weeks after he was killed.
Nice.
So this is the only album that he
was able to really see,
like from start to finish, like
and even the aftermath of it.
Right.
Wow.
So like that's something that, you know, as we talked about before, being able to look back and look at, you know what I'm saying, what an album is and what an album was, what an album is, and who the artist was and who they could be. I think that I wonder now, you know, Biggie was 21, 22 recording this album. And much as we talked about with Chris Brown in part 1 of this episode, in your 20s, like, you know, maybe you're a Nas, but even, you know what I'm saying, as you get into some of Nas's, like, you know, if you get into It Was Written, or I want to say it, or Nostradamus. Nostradamus, in a lot of ways, you know what I'm saying, is a very, like, it ain't as conscious probably as Nas is known for being, because I think that was the one where You Owe Me and stuff like that on.
Love it.
Okay, my shit. But you know what I'm saying, a different side of Nas that we're not getting in Illmatic. It makes you wonder what would have been the scope of Biggie's work, what would have been, where would he have drawn influence from moving forward if he had been afforded more time. To grow and evolve and come from being so, because in order to rap about more stuff, you gotta be exposed to more stuff, and so, you know what I'm saying, on Ready to Die, he's rapping about the shit he's lived, he's done. Okay? Baby, Biggie was out here fucking and getting money. You know what I'm saying? Let him tell it. So, you know what I mean? That's something that, and I don't think that I had thought about that. It's easy. It's been a lot easier to think about that with Tupac. Because when Tupac was alive, you saw glimpses of his dual consciousness, right? You didn't really see that as much with Biggie. If you listen to the popular stuff or the singles and things like that. That's why I say I think a song like Suicidal Thoughts, or even like taking Give Me the Loot and not think about just what he's talking about, but how he went about constructing it. It's just like, oh, like there's a little bit more here. If you think about Me and My Bitch, you know what I'm saying, even that's like okay, like this is like Thug Morning, you know what I mean? Like it it might not be sitting here like, you know, I love that girl, da da da. But it's like, no, that was my ride or die. You know what I mean? It's like you express, you access the emotional intelligence that you're privy to. And so his was limited, you know what I mean?
Very limited.
So he accessed what he had or what he knew he had, and so it's interesting.
I will say yes. I think that he tried his absolute hardest to pull emotionally for this album, and this was the result.
And I think it is. It's a lot of emotions wrapped up in here. It's just definitely a project that like you have to listen through. You have to listen through like. I had to listen from start to finish in one sitting to
absolutely.
be able to just be like, okay, and like now I can go back and probably take the album. I would take a few songs at a time, just listen through those. But he definitely was saying something and giving us a level of access to who he was.
So it's interesting because with Nas, right? We get to see the other side, you know, whereas for Biggie, like you were saying, we don't get to see how he would have evolved, you know? I mean, you look at, even in the way that Illmatic is still appreciated, like on its 20-year anniversary, there was like a live performance at the Kennedy Center.
It sure was.
Yeah, did you go or?
I did not go, which is crazy because I was living in DC at the time.
Right, yeah, no, I was too. It's crazy. But so I think that was like my first semester of law school. And I remember there was this girl that I was in school with that really, really liked Nas, and she went and we were talking about it. But it just seemed like a cool thing, you know, like being like new to DC and all that other stuff. I was just like, oh, because I think Kendrick did something similar, you know. I think it was with To Pimp a Butterfly. I think it was before
God.
Damn.
I'm so mad I missed that.
Me too. But yeah, I mean, so I think there's been a crossover and a celebration of Illmatic even as recently as 5 years ago.
Right.
You know?
And even for even with that appreciation, yesterday was Record Store Day 2019. If you don't know what Record Store Day is, it's pretty much a day where a lot of record stores across the country will have different specials, different things to get people to re-engage with music stores in the ways that we used to.
I know you wrapped up.
You know, I did grab a couple of things. But with that, so not only are there usually like a lot of like performances or like special things that different stores will do, but there's also like an overarching like Record Store Day kind of like site and like, and they have a list of vinyls that are going to be Record Store Day whatever year releases. And so sometimes it's things that have never been pressed on vinyl before, so it's like a first time, or it's something that's being reissued. So for context and for this conversation, last year for Record Store Day, one of the albums on the Record Store Day list was a vinyl pressing of Nas's concert at the Kennedy Center with Illmatic. Yeah. So it's over in my collection.
Nice. So it's sitting right there.
Yeah, so and I think that if you think about just, you know, the layers of cultural impact there, where you have Nas that's gone from Illmatic, from in a way kind of like commercially disappointing debut, you know what I'm saying, young rapper, you know, building through the years their cultural industry and societal capital to be at a point where they are performing at the Kennedy Center, where they are, you know,
and performing that album.
Exactly. Right? I think that's a hell of a journey, and it's sometimes it's sad. Well, not sometimes. It is sad to think about the fact that, you know, a Biggie won't get, you know, the opportunity, or didn't get the opportunity, because before his second proper album could even get out, he was, you know, taken. Yeah. So.
And it's the other thing about that too, with Nas, I think, you know, maybe Illmatic wasn't super commercially successful when it came out, but I honestly don't know if that was what he wanted or needed at the time, you know? Like,
I know that's what their label was.
Right, well, right. You know, obviously that's always what they want, but it's just, and again, like, I think another word that a word that I will repeat, it was just very unassuming. I think that there's something about Illmatic that just feels just genuine in a way that's just like, I'm not trying to do anything with this besides rap and tell my story.
Right.
You know?
And it is interesting too that even in talking about the commercial success of things like that, Illmatic still sold almost twice what Ready to Die did.
Yeah. And
upon
the first week,
release. But of course, like again, different pushes and songs and things like that, saw different outcomes, but it definitely is interesting to see long-term commercial critical reception, and how does that translate over into success and longevity. And I think that both of these albums have stood the test of time, have held up. You think about it, there was a lot riding on both. There was probably even more riding though on the Biggie album,
right,
because Nas is signed to Columbia. Columbia Records been putting out music since, okay, but you have Biggie that's on Bad Boy. You know what I'm saying? This is a new imprint on Arista. Arista ain't really been putting out. You know what I'm saying? They haven't been known for their hip hop. Catalog. They ain't Def Jam.
And then also coming from
Arista. I'll do that research.
But then also coming from, leaving another label, right? I think there's a weight in that too, right? Like having to succeed on your first time out because you have honestly something to prove. Right. I think that's very real. But like you said, they stood the test of time, and Ben, and you mentioned this some, but like been referenced in later works and all that other stuff. I mean, I can't, the amount of times that Biggie has been sampled and used and all that other stuff from this album.
And I think a lot of those, of course, like they have to be intentional, but you think about the way that some of the artists that were close to Biggie when he was alive, your Lil Kims, your Puffy's, your Jay-Z's, your Faith,
right?
Like, and how he shows up in their music still to this day,
right?
Like there hasn't been an album I think that Kim has released where he wasn't cited as either an executive producer or as like a songwriter or something like that. Jay-Z has countless Biggie references. Faith just released an album called The King and I like a year or two ago.
Right. And she ain't talking about fucking Stevie J.
But yeah, I think that I think these are two definitely two classic albums and two albums that help to reestablish and reassert the East Coast and New York as a hip hop. Like hip hop was born here.
Right. Yeah. And even so with Biggie you have samples, but with Nas you have samples too, because
for sure.
One thing, and I didn't realize this until I listened to the album, but The World Is Yours. So Drake in the song on Nothing Was the Same, thank you. On Own It, that it's yours. Like I didn't realize where that came from, but it came from this song. So I feel certain ways about that Drake song, honestly. I like it. I just I feel like it's a little homoerotic, to be completely honest. Like
that's why I just look at you. I was like, I'm waiting for him to say something off the
like it's just listen to the lyrics. That's all I'll say. I think it tracks, but Biggie and Nas, great artists. I think part of what the reason why people like Kim, Puffy, Faith still are sampling or referencing or giving credit is this desire to keep them alive, right? Keep the spirit going.
For sure, because Biggie could have been an artist that after a certain generation you didn't think about him anymore. You know what I mean? But it is,
and we're kind of like we're 2 generations past Biggie. Yikes!
Right.
Yeah.
But of course, through sampling, which is, you know, even though it's something that got them in trouble with this album, because there definitely were some lawsuits and some samples that on the original pricing of Ready to Die aren't present now.
Right.
But sampling is a way, and has been a way to keep artists alive, and allows you to introduce certain artists to newer generations. And so I think with Biggie, for as wild as some of the stories he tell, and for his, I mean, you know, it has its downright vulgar moments.
Right.
It still is an album that captures a moment, a time,
and he tells those stories well.
He does.
Very, very well.
He does.
Yeah. And now it's just the same.
Oh, for sure.
So yeah.
So I was trying to figure out if I wanted to do an ending question, or if not, what do you think? Have we given the folks enough?
Maybe, yeah. I can't really think of any questions right now.
I know, right? It was gonna. I think I was gonna ask if there was a song from each of those albums.
Song swap.
So I wouldn't do song swap for this one because I think
either.
they're both kind of stories.
Right.
But is there a song that you could see Biggie featuring on from Illmatic?
Oh,
and is there a song that I think Nas could feature on from Ready to Die?
I don't know if I have the range for that. I can try. I think.
I'm so weak. I don't know if I have
I think it would either be, honestly, I would put him on one of the sample songs. So either Life's a Bitch or It Ain't Hard to Tell. Maybe It Ain't Hard to Tell.
I see that.
Yeah.
I see that. Yeah.
For sure. So I do. But yeah.
Let's see. I could see I'm trying to decide between a song that's on there or a song that I talked about, a song I didn't talk about.
Oh, true. I mean, you don't have to do a song you talked about.
Right. It would be interesting to hear. Oh. For some reason, I keep on coming back to I think it would be interesting to actually hear. It would be actually interesting to hear Nas on, I want to say Warning.
Okay.
I think it would be interesting to hear Nas on Warning.
That is interesting.
Like kind of going like back and forth with Biggie on.
Oh yeah.
This is what's going on.
Oh
like,
right,
what's
yeah.
up, you know what I'm saying? And maybe even like, you know, co-conspirator with him.
Right.
Like
yeah. I kind of think about, well, it's different, but like, do you know that song Mona Lisa on Lil Wayne's? Love it. Love it. But like kind of like that. With like two rappers kind of like telling a story, and they're both characters in that story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. Okay. Well, we can run it back.
Oh, yes.
If you want. Did you almost forget?
And when you say almost,
completely. And then,
oh my gosh, yes.
Okay, so I can kick it off.
Go for it.
So in the first part, I said, I was talking about Khalid, and I said that he would come up later. He's coming up in this part of the episode because, well, I said that American Teen was an album that I listened to once and just kind of put down. I mean, Location, of course, was on repeat, but you couldn't get away from that song.
Right.
His new album, Free Spirit, I love a lot. It's really, really good. It's a really good, it's an improvement on American Teen, just sonically.
Yeah. And that album was born.
Yeah, it just was.
Yeah.
And this one is not. It like sounds good. It has a good soundscape, but then beyond that, and something, and I was talking to one of my friends, well, Paul, I talked about him in the first part, but he was saying how like he sounds better, but then also Khalid was 17 when the first album came out, and now he's 21. So it's like, it makes sense, you know?
It's been that long?
Yeah, I think so. Shit. Or at least as far as when he recorded it. No. When did
You're right.
Wasn't it like...
That was like 2016. Yeah, because I remember where I was living.
Yeah.
I mean, it was up here, but I remember the place I was living in.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
But yeah, this new album is really, really good, and I'm listening to the whole thing, honestly.
Oh, wow.
Like, I was, like, I think meal prepping last week, and I was listening to it, and just, like, it's funny, because, like, so from Love Lies, he creates this sound that kind of, the only way that I can describe it is, like, the soundtrack to a teen cult classic. Like, every song, and it's not in a bad way, like, every song kind of sounds like you would be listening to it while, like, you were watching something like Love Simon or like The Breakfast Club or something like that in 2019. It just feels like, I don't know, it has this sound that, right, it has this sound that kind of has this, like, and not a shady way at all, but like background noise to a narrative. Like, you know, which it sounds shady, but it's, I don't mean it in that way. Like, the music it's like atmospheric, I think, is a better word. That's a better word, and a more positive word. It is. Yes. But I like it a lot, and so yeah, I have been running that back pretty consistently. But,
okay.
Yeah, what you got?
Well, so I want to talk about two people right quick.
Okay.
One of them is an artist from. Don't want to do that. Which one I want to do first? Okay. Actually, ladies go first.
Okay.
So, my first person to run it back that I want to briefly talk about is Karina Pagian.
Okay.
I can't remember if I've talked about her on the show before.
The one that did slow motion. Oh yeah. Have you heard the song Slow Motion too? Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Yeah.
Love her. Yeah. So at any rate, I thought about this because I follow her on social media. I've been following her for a little bit now. Just because sometimes you think about when you listen to a lot of music, you think about a lot of artists that were out and then they kind of disappeared. Right. Like, sometimes I just randomly be like, what is that person up to? Let me see if I can find anything on them. So she's one of those people. She released her debut album in 2008 when she was like 16.
Right. At will.
And I think that with Karina Pagian, if I had to come up with a musical equivalent to her, I would probably place her in the same boat as Chloe and Halle.
Okay.
For the reason that she was a super talented, like, young person, you know, can play keys, can sing in multiple languages, really beautiful tone, and, you know, things like that. I'm not sure, you know, to what degree she was writing her stuff or anything, but, you know, she was doing that, then definitely Chloe Halle, because I think that a lot of times with young artists that are that prolific, record labels have a hard time figuring out what to do with them.
Yeah.
And so in that regard, I think that with her, unlike Chloe and Halle, because the queen, you know, knows what she's doing, but unlike them with Karina Pagian, I think that it just, and I apologize for it if I'm mispronouncing her last name, I think they struggle with what to do with her, and, you know, eventually probably like cut her from the roster or something. Right. But she is still making music. She released an EP maybe like a year or two ago. That I listened through some of that, and I am not remembering that right now. Because the EP wasn't what made me think of her. Yeah. I saw this clip of her on Instagram where she was at this, I think, benefit concert or like a concert that Quincy Jones did. Okay. And was it Italy or somewhere? And she's standing there, Quincy Jones is sitting down, and he asked her to sing, you know, I guess one of his songs or something like that. And you see like she's singing and she's to a certain point, and he's like, no, keep going, like, because he wanted to hear more of it. And, you know, you just see like this look on her face of just like, oh my God, I can't believe like I'm singing for Quincy Jones. But it just reminded me of like what a crime with the industry, because she is such a talented artist. But, you know, even in looking back at her debut album, she has a lot of good cuts on there. So if you haven't ever, so it's kind of like a hybrid of While You Were Sleeping and Run That Back. But there are times definitely where I will run back Karina Page-Young songs, especially like a Slow Motion. She has a couple other songs. Oh God, they're escaping me right now. Could you handle it is one of them. And They Ain't Gotta Love You. Boom. Those are like 3 of my favorite songs by her. But she also has a song that was never on a project called I Know I Can Do Better, or I Can Do Better. That's good. And she has one with Trey Songz that wasn't released formally or anything called Understand Me. So check those out too. And then, Karina Page-Young, give her flowers, get into her if it's for the first time. Super dope, super amazing artist. And she just recently did some really good covers too on her IG. Last person I want to talk about, I've been meaning to talk about this individual for a couple of weeks now, but there is a rapper out of Virginia, out of Norfolk, named K-Wise, and you spell it K.YZ.
Okay.
That's how you can find him on Instagram. It's at 24K.YZ. And he has this project called Poetic Tissue. And I had the privilege of, he was looking for people to listen to it before he started releasing the project. And, I was just like, yo, I'll listen. Sent me the link. This was probably like over a month ago now. But really talented. Okay. Really, really, really dope artist. And I've been following him on IG for a while now, so I've seen a lot of his flowing on other beats or things like that. So I was like, oh no, this dude is, serious. But in listening to the project, it was a very solid project. And he's broken it up into pieces. Okay. So he released part 1 so far, and he released the interlude. Just a couple of tracks to really, point you all toward. From part 1, About That and the new HP. Those are both songs that I can hear on the radio and people will get their life to. Yeah. And then from the interlude, he has Overdrive interlude and the Chocolate interlude. Both of those are amazing as well. So I'm pretty sure that there's a lot more to come from this artist, and especially if some of the songs from this project that I heard that haven't been released on part 1 or on the interlude, they come out, they're crazy as well. Yeah. So definitely want to show some love to VA and VA artists. Because that's where we from. So in Norfolk, Virginia was like another home. So definitely want to shout him out.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well,
dun, dun, dun.
I think that's all we got for y'all today.
It is.
Feel free to follow us on our social media.
Yes.
If you wanna.
Yes. So on Instagram, you can find us at OTN_podcast. You can flip on over to Facebook and search us at OTN podcast. No underscore there. And if you follow the breadcrumbs, you usually can follow us from IG to Facebook and vice versa. Right. We also have a YouTube channel.
Yes.
Search On That Note Podcast. For your ease and for branding, our names are on our logos. So if you ever look up On That Note Podcast or see OTN Podcast, but you don't see Calvin and Brandon or Brandon and Calvin or any variation thereof.
Not us.
Not at all. And can't promise,
right.
quality. So that's how you can find us on social media.
And then also, again, write us a note at gmail.com. That is our email. If you want to sponsor an episode, if you want to write us a note, if you have questions for us, comments, anything like that. Also, for people that are listening to the show, if you all want to review, I think maybe this is what you wanted me to say, review, rate us on the podcast app. We would love to get some reviews. We would love to get,
and thank
some
you
ratings.
To those who
right,
have,
exactly, absolutely. It seems like you all enjoy what we do, and we enjoy that you enjoy us.
Yes. And where can they listen to us?
So, few places actually. So, the podcast app. So, like, I guess the Apple, whatever you would call it, on the iPhones. Yeah, whatever they are calling it these days. So we're on Spotify also. We're on SoundCloud. Like you said, we're on YouTube. Yeah.
And we're hoping to continue giving you all quality content.
Right.
And we thank you all for your support. Tell a friend about us.
Yes.
Keep listening.
Absolutely.
And see what we do next.
All right. We will see you all next time.
Peace.
Bye.